Hi everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to my board game guides. Now, I'm a really big fan of economic board games. I'd say they're probably my favorite genre of board games. But what I'm not really a fan of is that a lot of these games come with paper money. That's right, slips of colored paper. And let me walk you through why I'm not really big on paper money. So when playing economic games, you'll have to deal with a lot of transactions. Buying stock, selling stocks, collecting dividends. Or buying power plants, buying resources, expanding your network, and collecting revenue. With all of what you have to do, paper money is not an ideal way to manage your transactions. First of all, it can be difficult to transfer back and forth. You have to count out each slip, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it's not something that can be done especially quickly. And depending on the type of money you're using, sometimes they even clump up, like these right here. This is clumping up, and it's not very easy to transact. And then finally, because of the volume of transactions that go back and forth, paper money is not durable. It's flimsy, it gets bent fairly quickly, and like these, starts to show signs of wear and tear pretty quick. So with all the pain that paper money brings, you need a good substitute when you're playing economic games. And thankfully, there is a very good substitute. And that would be poker chips. So now, if you want to use poker chips as a gaming accessory, you're probably going to ask, what kind of set should I get? And there's a lot of stuff to choose from, admittedly. Here is a sample of my collection. It includes everything from the really cheap plastic stuff to slightly better to even better china clays, to stuff that borders pretty close on casino-grade quality. So for this segment, I'll walk you through each of those sets, tell you what I like and dislike about them, and hopefully that will help you get a better idea on what poker chip set to get for your collection. So when you're looking at poker chips, know that poker chip preferences varies person by person. And you'd have to understand what's important to you when you're looking for a particular set. And for that, I tend to look to see whether a poker chip set is countable. So a big part of that goes into the edge spots for a particular poker chip. I also like it to be denominated. These aren't, but I'll kind of talk about that later. And then last of all, I want it to feel well. So when I can play around with it and have it feel pretty nice in my hands. Some do it a lot better than others, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like. And then finally for me, the build quality is also fairly important. And in some cases, plastic chips might be what works best for you. Now, these chips tend to be fairly cheap. Now, I'm not talking about insanely cheap like those interlocking plastic chips, but these are nonetheless fairly inexpensive. The dice chips, these tend to be fairly ubiquitous, fairly common. You can see them all over the place in Target, Walmart, what have you. And for most people, they serve their purposes. Sure, these chips aren't denominated, but you can easily create a guide on the spot to show how much each chip is worth. The downside, of course, is these chips aren't really well built. Their quality isn't exactly up there. So let me tell you what that looks like. It comes from the fact that the chips themselves aren't necessarily flat. Let me kind of show you. If I put a stack together right here, well, they'll kind of wiggle back and forth. You can definitely sense some wiggling as you press down on each side. And furthermore, if you press and hold down the side, you can kind of see there's a little bit of a gap in some of those chips. Not exactly the best way of going about it, but you get what you pay for. The issues are more pronounced in the dice chips, I think, which is why I prefer the bicycle ones. So you can see here quite a bit of a gap, and they definitely wiggle because the build quality isn't really that great. So if these aren't exactly concerns for you, if you don't mind the fact that these chips aren't well built, they'll get the job done. And if that's all you need, then go with those. They're cheap, they're plentiful, they're easy to find, and that might just be what you're looking for. So next up, we have the Poker Nights chip set. These chips are a step above the plastic chips that I showed you earlier, and you can tell that the quality is slightly better, although it's nothing really amazing. These are dollar denominated, so when people look at the chip, they know exactly how much it's worth, so that's a very nice feature. When playing a lot of economic games, I prefer having dollar denominated chips, so that way there's no confusion. So if you're familiar with poker, you're not going to immediately, you'll be doing fine because blues and whites are still ones, reds are still fives, and greens are 25. But if you're not from the poker world, then having dollar amounts shown on the chip is super, super helpful. Now, the thing about them is that their design is somewhat similar to a casino chip, and they feel a lot heavier than the plastic chips because a lot of these have a metal slug on the inside. So for the most part, if you're looking to upgrade your set, you could do a lot worse than having a set of Poker Nights chips because these are super functional and they're pretty good in general. The only downside with these is that I'm not really fond of their designs too much because this 500 looks kind of dull, looks uninspiring. Sure, there's the look that's similar to a casino chip, but it's not particularly stand out. It's not flashy, it's not colorful, it's not really memorable. Again, if you don't care about that, that's fine, it's not important. The big thing for me, however, is if you look at some of the sides. So if you feel the side, this chip in particular, the top one that I'm looking at right now, has a bit of a sharp edge, and that comes from the mold. Maybe the mold didn't get clipped properly, or I don't know what it is, but this feature is prominent in a lot of the Poker Nights chips. So if you feel it as a whole, and you hold it like so and rub your fingers across it, as some people may do, it has some sharp edges to it, and it's not exactly pleasant. Furthermore, the flatness is also an issue. So if I hold it like this, the chip wiggles. And then if I pinch one side of it, yeah, you should be able to see some gaps there. So quality isn't amazing, but then again, it's not crazy expensive either. So if you're looking for things that are functional, if you're looking for dollar denominated chips, then again, these might just work for you. For me, I prefer something a little bit more. So these chips are out, but if you're not looking to spend a whole ton, these work just fine. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at the Monacos. So these are Monaco chips, and the cool thing about these is that these are made in the same factory as the casino grade chips that you'll find in Vegas. And the great thing about these two is that they're dollar denominated, so you can see how much every chip is worth. There's no source of confusion at all. And the designs are also pretty nice. It's very bright and colorful. The edge spots might not necessarily be the best. It can kind of blend in a little bit. So I'm not as big a fan of that. It can be hard to differentiate, but if you're looking for a really good quality chip, these would be it. So when you look at it from the quality standpoint, all the hallmarks that you would expect from a casino-grade chip are there. If I build a block out of this, and let me get rid of the rest, it forms a solid block. If I start pinching my fingers to try to make this seesaw back and forth, they won't. And if I pinch it on one side, no holes at all. So it's pretty good from the build quality standpoint. So these will be durable, these will last. Now, the thing you have to think about, though, is that because these are pretty close to casino-grade chips, they are going to be a lot pricier. So you're not going to be able to get these for less than 85 cents a chip. And when you order a chipset of about 300 chips, that's going to add up. So be cognizant of that. But if that's not a barrier, then maybe you should consider this. But the biggest caveat that I will say for board gamers is that this might not be the set that you settle on, because the denominations are as they are. They come in 1s, 5s, 10s, 25s, there's also hundreds, 500s, thousands, and so on. But the biggest issue is the 25 chip. And I say that because a lot of games don't really have a transaction amount of 25. And if you haven't figured this out by now, I am definitely referring to the train games in the 18XX family, like 1830, 1846, and so on. A lot of the transactions revolving around track building in the 18XX games require a $20 chip, which is not present in a lot of casino-grade chips. And because of that, that might be a deal breaker for you. You might find that having to pay $25 and then get $5 back and accumulating a big stack of $5 chips to be really inconvenient. And because of that, you might decide that casino-grade chips aren't for you because you can't find one with the denominations that you prefer. And that's completely fair. Totally get it. And if that's the case, well, let's take a look at the next set. Last but not least, we come to this set. This set of poker chips is called the Bank Chips. It's released by a company called Apache Poker Chips, and it's made specifically for board gamers in mind, especially for those who play the 18XX train games. So this set of chips are called China Clays. At least that's the way you'll see them advertised on a lot of poker chip websites. And I have to say, I really love these chips. They feel nice. The edge spots are nice and flashy. You can easily count how many chips are in a given stack. And best of all, they're dollar denominated. Here's a 1, here's a 5, there's 10s, but also there's 20s, which are perfect if you're really into 18XX games. And if you look at it really, really closely, you can see a really nice design in that there are train tracks that circle around the chip inlay. Talk about a great way to appeal to board gamers, especially those who play train games. And finally, the build quality is excellent. If you try to take a stack of chips and make them seesaw back and forth by pressing the sides, they're not going to move much. They stay pretty flat. So that's a sign of a very good quality control. And if you try to see if there's any gaps by pressing one side of the chip, well, you're not really going to find any. So that speaks very highly to how well these chips are made. Finally, these chips are pretty much in the middle of the road in terms of how expensive they are. So they're more expensive than the really cheap plastic chips that I highlighted earlier, but they're also not as expensive as the casino-grade chips. So I referenced earlier the casino-grade chips are probably around 80 cents a chip. Well, these are probably going to be somewhere between 45 to 50 cents, so much less expensive, which means you can easily get a good quality chipset at a pretty good price. So if you're a big gamer, especially playing train games, this is the set that I'd go for. Now, after going through all that, if you've decided that you do indeed want to get a poker chip set, and you've identified what poker chip set you want to get, well, the next question might be, how many chips should I get from each denomination? What should my chip distribution look like? And the answer to that is, it depends on what game you're playing. So if you're going to play with a lot of Euro games that handle low dollar amounts, then maybe you don't need that many chips. You can probably get by with a chip set of 150 chips. And from that, this is the denominations distribution that I would recommend. So 51s, 55s, 25 25s, and 25 100s. This should generally cover what you'll need for most Euro games. Now, if you've decided that you don't really want to have to trade up chips, so say trade 5 1s for 1 5, and not have to do that too often in a game, then maybe a 200 chip set is the right set for you. And for that, this is the distribution that I'd recommend. So 75 1s, 75 5s, 25 25s, and 25 100s. Generally should be able to cover most Euro games. Now, if you play heavier economic games, say a Splatter or an 18xx game, then a 300 chip distribution is what I'd recommend. So that distribution would include 75 1s, 75 5s, 75 25s, 50 100s, and 25 500s. All told, this should give you a bankroll of around $19,800 and will be sufficient for about 90% of the games you'll ever play. The only cases that this won't cover are 18xx games that are super long and would require probably a 500 chip distribution. And because you're watching this video, I'm assuming you haven't really thought about using poker chips in board games, so you probably don't have to get to the 500 chip level just yet. Figure out what kind of games you play, and that will inform what kind of chip set you'll decide to go for. Now, whether you want to invest in a poker chip set is entirely up to you. But if you're as big a fan of economic games as I am, I highly recommend it, because you'll be able to use it for games like this, or this, or this. Hopefully that was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.